Okay, here we go with a little bit of an overview of Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is dealing with measurement and scaling. The learning objectives for this chapter are understanding the role of measurement in marketing research, basically the title of the course. There's 4 different levels of scales. Scales are what we use to measure different items in your survey instruments or your questionnaires. I'm going to describe scale development and why it's important to primary data gathering, and also what this deal is between comparative and non-comparative scales. So in understanding the role of measurement in marketing, so this is really where we've been building this whole course. Measurement is the process of developing methods to systematically characterize or quantify. So now again we're talking about quantitative analysis, quantitative research, as opposed to qualitative. And we're quantifying information about people, events, ideas, or some other objects of interest. So there's 2 tasks that have to do with the measurement process. One is construct selection or development, and the constructs, if you recall, are you have variables. Variables can be the items or the questions that make up so they're the observable things or the things that we can answer in a questionnaire, and they make up the construct. So the construct selection, so what is it that we're interested in studying, and then that way we'll know what variables or what questions to ask, as well as the scale measurement. So the scale then would be, if we're asking questions, what are the options we're going to provide people to respond. So construct development is a process that researchers identify the characteristics and then they define the concept being studied. So again, a construct really is a construct, a concept. It's not observable, and the pieces of it that you get at to make it observable then would be how you ask questions and what those variables are. On the other hand, scale measurement is the options that you're providing people with a way to respond to, which then makes it a variable, and those responses, when you pull them together, will make up a construct. So there's 4 different levels of scales. There's nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So nominal scales really are they're called the most basic, and they provide the least amount of data. Nominal, the best way for me to remember it is nominal is basically like a name. It's a name of the way that you're responding. It's a label. Nominal scales ask respondents things like, what's your gender, male, female, what's your religion, Catholic, Presbyterian, Lutheran. So those are names or titles that we give ourselves. Whereas ordinal scales, ordinal scales require respondents to provide basically a magnitude. Ordinal scales are things would be like name your top 5 favorite ice creams in order of your most favorite to your least favorite. So that's, again, it's putting them in a rank order. It's not saying how much more you like 1 versus 2. It's just saying that 1 is the first one, it's your favorite, then your next favorite, all the way down to your least favorite. So ordinal scales give you a greater than or a less than, but they don't give you the amount greater than or the amount less than. You can get information like mean or medians and ranges, as well as modes and frequencies, but not means. Let's see. Ordinal scales determine relative position. For example, they excuse me. They don't tell you how much more or less, just that there is more or less. Sorry about that. So ordinal scales provide you with information about more or less, but not the amount more or the amount less. So it's not an absolute difference between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3. Interval scales, however, enable researchers to show those absolute differences. Unlike the ordinal scales, they are absolutely the distance between 1 and 2 is the same as between 2 and 3 and 3 and 4. So it's an absolute difference. Interval data provides us with information that would be means and standard deviations. They can be calculated, as well as the mode, the median, and the frequency, distribution, and the range. Now this is important because in upcoming chapters you're going to have to know what kind of data you have in order to understand which statistical method you're going to use. So again, when we come back to nominal, ordinal, interval, and the last one I'm going to talk about is ratio, these differences of whether or not they are measuring absolute differences and the kinds of statistical analysis that you can do is really going to be the way you can determine which statistical method you're going to be able to do. Ratio scales enable researchers to identify absolute differences between each scale point, and they also provide you with that absolute comparison. So ratios would be when we talk about the ratio of an amount compared to a greater amount. So it's a portion of something. So again, it's when we think about ratios, it's something that's much more concrete. In describing scale development and the importance in gathering data, there's 3 components to the measurement scale. One is your question and your setup. So when you're going to do primary data gathering, you're going to be thinking about how you're going to ask questions. You're going to be thinking about what the dimensions are of the object or the construct. So remember, a construct is not observable, so the parts that are observable then become those items or those variables, those questions that we're going to ask. So we're looking at how those different parts come together to form the construct. And then we're going to talk about the scale point descriptors. So Likert scales are one of the kinds of scales that is used when you're doing survey development. When you ask a question and you're asked a question about answering something on a scale of something to something, how much you agree or disagree, those would be an example of a Likert scale. Then we have something called a semantic differential. Semantic differential scales are used to create what's called a perceptual image or a perceptual map. And it gives you an idea when it's plotted of how things kind of group together. Its format is used what's called a bipolar scale, so you'll have things kind of on opposite ends. Then there's a scale that's called behavioral intention. Behavioral intention scales then measure the likelihood. So how likely is it that somebody is going to do something? How likely is it that somebody will make a purchase? How likely is it that somebody will make a donation? How likely is it that somebody will come back to the store again or the restaurant again? Scale point descriptors then, such as definitely would, probably would not, and definitely would not, are used in intention kinds of scales. So again, it's giving you the information about how likely the person is to do something. The last I'm going to talk about is the comparative versus non-comparative scales. Comparative scales require the respondent to make a direct comparison between 2 products. So one product over the other product. Do you like this product or do you like that product? Do you like these products here compared to these other products or services? Non-comparative sales then scales rate products or services independently. So you're looking at a particular product, and you may then look at that product and look at specific features and benefits of that product. So you're only comparing that product. Blue versus red, heavy versus light. So you're looking at one specific product and you're making comparisons of just that product with various features and benefits, as opposed to looking at a Chevy versus a GM versus a Ford. Both scales then are considered interval or ratio, and they're more advanced. And the more advanced scales provide you with more options when it comes to statistical analysis. You have a lot of information that you can gather because of the way that the information is gathered and the scales that you're using, and then what's called the variability of ways that people can respond. Let's see. In addition, comparative scales require what's called fewer theoretical assumptions. So it's easier then for people to understand what it is that you're trying to ask. It's not something that is, so out there that you're not really able to understand what the question is.